Hello and welcome to our show today. My name is Kathy Crawford and I would love for you to join us in watching our show because I've got a very special guest. I would like to say we've had a little bit of a hiatus, you might say. My show hasn't been on for several months due to elections. It would have been unfair if I had kept the show going for my opposition anyway. I would have had undue advantage over them. So you haven't seen our show, but I hope you continue watching because we're going to be having continuous great guests on the show. So thank you for tuning in. You might want to get a pencil or paper or something and jot down some notes or some things you don't want to forget. Well, without further ado, I would like to introduce everyone to Roy Prentice. And Roy is the manager of the Tollgate Farms, which is on 12 Mile and Meadowbrook Road. What I would also like for you to know about Roy is that he was the chairman of the Historical Commission, and he's still very actively involved in promoting Novi's history. I'm now the chairman of Novi's Historical Commission, but Roy was involved in a very special project that is what we're specifically going to talk about today. So, Roy, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Kathy.
Yeah.
Really happy to be here.
Yeah. I know that you are really anxious for everyone to know a little bit about the history. We don't have a cute little downtown like some other communities, but we still have history. And you were very instrumental in pointing out the historical significance of certain parts of our community. And so that's what I'd like to talk about. First of all, if you tell me a little bit about the Motor Cities Project and how it came to be. I know it's part of the National Heritage area and is somehow or other affiliated with the National Park Service. So we have 8 markers here in Novi that are freshly installed. So tell us a little bit about how we got involved in this project to begin with.
Sure. So as you say, there is a lot of historical interest in Novi. There are a lot of aspects of Novi that are still exist that hark back to our past. The first settler in Novi started in 1825, so there's a lot of opportunity to kind of build up a history.
Yeah.
So the project that the Historical Commission was involved with when I was on it is this the Novi Motor Cities Marker Project. And as you say, the Motor Cities Markers project in Novi is part of a bigger project. It's part of the it's a historic area, Motor Cities area. It is affiliated with the National Park Service. And it recognizes properties, area of southeast and really all of southern Michigan that had something to do in some way with the automobile industry, maybe with the development of the automobile, the use of the automobile, labor involved in that. It often could be other forms of transportation that kind of hooked into that, so railroads would have filled in with that too. And so it really has something to do with really almost any part of transportation. And so in Novi, we chose to focus on 8 different marker subjects, and we kind of thought about more or less a lot of communities, and there are many communities. There's over 200 markers throughout the Motor Cities National Heritage area.
Is there a document or a brochure about all of the markers everywhere? I know we have one here, but is there one showing all the other markers?
So a part of the Motor Cities project is to create there is a website, and to have as part of that website a listing of all the markers, so that if you wanted to take a tour of the Motor Cities, you could go to the motorcities.org website, and that site would, in time, will have all of the markers listed. Right now it shows the National Heritage area that the markers are in, and they're working on.
I know Wixom brought their markers that they were going to have installed and showed them to us at the Historical Commission meeting, and we all got very enthused about what they actually look like.
Yep.
So I would like to talk about the locations, where they're located now, and one of the most significant areas in Novi that I think people recognize, and it historically has been a real key intersection, has been the intersection of Grand River and Novi Road. Now we have a marker there, but it's a little, you may not have noticed, people may not have noticed because they don't, it's newly installed, but it sits back near a sidewalk, and they may not realize that it's right on the corner of Novi Road and Grand River, and it would be on the northeast corner. So what is on that marker that's significant about Novi on that particular marker?
So on that marker, it really focuses on that corner and the kinds of things that were there. Novi has traditionally been a farm community, but it did have that as its focus of commerce, because right there where Novi and Grand River come together, the railroad tracks are not very far away. If you were an early farmer in the area and you wanted to get your product to market, you would take it to the railroad. You would use Grand River or Novi as your main arteries to get elsewhere. So that was really a focus area for the community. So the kinds of things that are there are the Morin store used to be located on the corner, and that was one of the early buildings in the area. The old Bates Hamburger is a more recent denizen of that area, but that was very iconic for the Novi area.
Yeah,
so
everybody remembers the smell of the hamburgers.
The hamburgers there, sure.
Yeah.
That grease
I know
carries a
you
long
mentioned
way.
Matt Morin's store, which would have been on the northwest corner.
Right.
And one of the things in the little brochure said Matt Morin's store had the first gas pump in the township. And you told me a little bit about what that gas pump looked like. So tell me, that for our viewing audience, you would tell me.
So the early gas pumps were designed to be able to be used without electricity, and so you did that with hand power. So there was a hand pump that you would pump the gasoline up into a visible glass container at the top of the pump, and it would be there would be 1 gallon gradations in that. So if you wanted to buy 5 gallons, you pumped it until you got up to the 5 gallon line. That was higher than your car, so then you'd pull the handle off, you'd put the hose into your car, and by gravity it would flow out.
Oh.
So you kind of selected the amount of gasoline initially, and paid for that. And so.
But Matt Morin's store also was right near a building that was for sheep. Where you take your wool, right?
Right. The old wool house is just to the west along Grand River, past the Napa Auto Parts store, and it's a tall. Two-story.
The building's still there.
Yeah, building's still there, tall 2-story building, and that would have been a place where you would have brought your wool. It would have weighed. They would probably purchase it there and then put it on the train, and then off it'd go to somewhere else. So that building still exists.
While we're still thinking about Grand River, further down Grand River, further west, just before you get to the viaduct, the new viaduct there, if you go off to the left is where the old feed store was located, and the building is still there.
Right.
So there is a marker there, just as you would, if you would go up over the viaduct, it's just to the left.
Right.
And that particular marker, what's on that particular marker?
So that talks about the early days of train travel, and then the importance of the railroad to the Novi community. So the kinds of things there, it talks about the building of the viaduct, because that was built in the 1920s and the train came through in the 1870s. So for a long time it was just a grade crossing where Grand River crossed the railroad. Well, building that initial bridge was a big part of the community's development, and it was a lot of effort. It's kind of interesting that a lot of the labor that built that bridge was convict labor.
Really?
And so they'd come out, and that was part of their service time, was to do that. When I was on the commission, I received a picture from one of the members of the Novi community of the initial work gang that was working on that bridge, and then it was a group of about 60 people. It's on the marker, that image is, and there's a little X over top of one. And I'd say, well, who's that? Well, that was my grandfather. So
really?
Yeah, so it was kind of interesting. He was one of the folks that was paid to be there rather than.
Oh, he wasn't a convict.
No,
Let's
he
make
wasn't
that
a
clear.
convict. Yeah,
Let's make
right.
that clear, yeah. Well, I still remember going to that feed store. And as I said, the building still exists, but that's where, because I grew up on a farm in Novi, so we would go there to get chicken feed in particular. And I know people can still purchase feed there.
Sure, yeah, it's a Novi feed now. And you're right, the old Novi train depot is one of the buildings in their building complex there. And so that depot would have been a passenger depot, but primarily really a freight depot, because you were servicing the farms in the area, and so people would bring things that they needed to ship out or parts and machinery that they were getting in. And so it wasn't so much designed as a more elegant, fancy passenger depot, but it was a very important part of the community.
Since people back in the day, anyway, back in the 40s anyway, for sure, when they would go to get feed, your feed came in kind of a sack, a big cloth sack that had a print on it. And when we were done with the feed, when it was all done, my mother would always wash the feed sacks, and then she and my grandmother would make clothes out of the patterns, out of whatever the cloth was. People used everything back then. So I know that feed store has really been an important thing to Novi, and one of the reasons why it was important was because it had something to do with why Novi was named Novi. Why it was named Novi, because the farmers that would come to pick up their orders and everything couldn't write a great big long word. And back in the 20s or before that, we were called North Farmington, I think. It says on one of the markets.
1820s.
1800s.
Yeah,
we were actually called
West Farmington.
West Farmington.
Yep.
Oh yeah, not North Farmington.
That's
West
okay.
Farmington.
That's good.
Yeah. So that had a lot to do with how Novi got its name. Is it was so long, the farmers couldn't, most of them were not well educated, so they couldn't write it. So they were looking for a short name. And it does say in the marker information, the name Novi was chosen in the 1830s as a shorter alternative to the community's original name.
Right.
So.
Wanted something kind of new and exciting and punchy,
yeah.
and Novi fits the bill.
Oh, it does, absolutely. And there's not a person, wherever I go, through any city, and no matter where I'm traveling, if somebody hears that I'm from Novi, they say, oh, I know how Novi got its name, because it was the 6th stop on the toll road, which is a great story, but
it's a great
number
story.
6, but it's
right.
not
it just
true.
Happens to not be true, but
but
details.
Everybody always wants to tell us that.
Right.
Well, another one of the markers. Actually, we have 3 markers over at Walled Lake, and 3 of the markers talk about the Walled Lake Casino, which was one destination, the Walled Lake Amusement Park, and all of the little amenities that were there by the beach and the boats, the motorboats and everything.
Yeah.
So those 3 markers are right there at the new, what's called Pavilion Shores Park. So why did we pick those markers?
Well, so Novi, our community, has a lot of aspects to it, and we really wanted to highlight a piece that maybe people don't usually associate with Novi, and that was sort of the recreation piece, because Novi and the southern part of Walled Lake, which is part of Novi, all the way up to 14 Mile Road, was a real destination for recreation. People would come out of Detroit and they'd drive up Grand River, and then they'd hit Novi Road and head north, and they would get to that the southern part of Walled Lake. And so in the early part of the 1900s, 1919, I think, was when the casino was first built, and then 1929 was when the amusement park got going. That whole southern part of Walled Lake, from that point forward, was really a destination for recreation. So,
a lot of I know, especially auto-related businesses, when the auto businesses really got cranked up, and Henry Ford had so many factories, a lot of the people use the Walled Lake Amusement Park, or those auto companies use them for picnics for their employees. And they would have tug-of-wars, and they would have all kinds of activities and bring all their employees out to use the beach, or mainly it was the amusement park, because there were a number of amusement parks. And one of the things on the markers about the amusement park was the gentleman that built the roller coaster, which was famous. He had built so many roller coasters. His name was Fred Pierce, it says here. And he had already built 27 roller coasters throughout the United States.
Throughout the United States, for other people.
For other people,
right.
But he wanted his own. And
a flying dragon.
Flying dragon.
I love
that's
that
right.
name.
Yeah, I do too. I do too. So he actually built that wood roller coaster, which I was on several times.
Wow.
And I know I'm really, a relic, I guess you might say,
because
that was the scariest thing ever to me. But
really?
Of course, I was probably about 5 years old,
Yeah.
and then I was about 10 years old, and
Yeah.
it was always scary to me. And one thing I wanted people to know is when they were building Pavilion Shores, and you were very much involved in that as well, because there were some artifacts found there by a gentleman who used a metal detector, and then they gave them to the city. He gave them to the city, and we have them in our history room. And some of the items that were found, maybe you can explain some of the things that were found there, if you recall.
Oh, sure,
yeah.
There was really a mix, as you can imagine, with 60 years of use of that area.
Yeah.
A lot of tags. So, like if you were going to swim in the lake and you wanted a locker, well, the locker attendant would give you a tag, and you'd put your things in there, and it was a little metal piece with your number of your locker, and so then you'd go do your thing, and some of those got lost,
Yeah.
so they ended up on the beach. A lot of that. There was a shooting gallery, so there was little .22 shells that were part of
Because they used real
because
ammunition.
they actually used ammunition. It's kind of hard to put your head behind that, but so there's a lot of little shells around. There were a lot of kind of little gewgaw knick-knack things that you might win.
Makeup kind of
Yeah,
things,
makeup, cosmetic type of thing. So
and the badge, there was that one badge that
Yeah.
was so beautiful,
Yeah.
that badge.
Yep.
But if you ever found this, you were supposed to telegraph or somebody's number. It was sort of like a Secret Service kind of thing. I don't know what it was,
Yeah.
but
The kinds of things that would fall out of your pockets if you're walking on the beach, or maybe you're flying around on a roller coaster or whatever. They ended up kind of scattered all over that and then incorporated into the soil. So it was a lot of really interesting things. And as you say, it's now a display in the library's local history room.
yeah, so I hope that people know that they can come to the history room if they make an appointment. And people that are interested in genealogy as well can go there and do some research. And all they have to do is make an appointment. We don't just leave the building open all the time, the room open all the time, but it's on the second floor of the Novi Library, Novi Public Library.
Great
Okay,
resource.
let's talk about one of the other on the shores of Walled Lake. What was, I know there was the bathhouse, and there was also, it said in the one marker, it had pictures of like little cabins. So there were cabins along the lake, and a lot of people don't know that you could go there, and it was called, I think, Sonaqua Shores.
Yep.
And you could go there and rent a cabin.
Rent a cabin for the summer if you wanted. Yeah, either at the actual shoreline where the recreation's going on, or elsewhere on Walled Lake, and then go down and enjoy the. I actually have worked with a woman who did that. Her family
Really?
every summer she went up and they would rent a cabin, and her dad, worked in Detroit, and he would spend time at their regular house and then come out on the weekend. She has very fond memories of staying in a cabin out there.
And I saw in the little You Ought to Know thing that the first silent movies in the area were shown at Sonaqua Shores Dance Pavilion, because there was also a dance pavilion there.
Yeah. So that was the forerunner
that was-
to the casino dance
Right.
pavilion. And when people think about casinos now, they think about gambling and
Sure.
betting. But at its base, the word casino just means a gathering of people. And that's what that was designed to be, is more of a dance hall, and you'd have hundreds and thousands of people dancing there on a Saturday night.
Oh yeah, and
so
it
it
was
wasn't
big
a betting
bands.
thing at all.
Big bands.
Yeah.
I mean, even little Stevie Wonder, when he was first, before he was ever famous, was one of the performers there,
performers
and all
there,
the
yeah.
big bands, I think, performed there.
Absolutely, just the place to be in the 30s, 40s,
Yeah.
and into the 50s. Yeah.
And one of our markers there also shows that. It shows a ticket that you would have purchased to go to the dance hall. Also shows what the dance hall looked like, and
yeah.
the crowds. And some of the, I think it was Guy Lombardo. There was just, it was unbelievable how many well-known performers performed there in Walled Lake.
Right.
Which was in Novi at the Walled Lake Casino.
Sure.
And
a radio
people that were
broadcast
famous.
from there,
Yeah,
too.
Yeah, radio broadcast. Yeah. So it was a great thing. And back in the Roaring 20s, I guess, was when it was its
when
heyday.
I think that facility opened in the 20s, and then it was right on through the the 30s and 40s. It was really a big thing.
The markers themselves, too, have not only the information, but they also have pictures. So if you see one of the markers, and there'd be 3 of them there at Pavilion Shores, you can go up there and you can see the pictures of what, real photographs of what it looked like at that particular location, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're
with
on
the
a stand.
descriptions on a
It's
stand.
weather, and the weather
each
doesn't
marker
bother.
themselves is, I think, 3 feet by 4 feet. So it's a large display, and the images are large enough that they mean something to you when you look at them. So it's very nice.
Well,
very nice.
going back to then, one of the markers too actually discusses the Tollgate Farm, where you are a manager of it. It actually didn't call it Tollgate at the time, but it talked about Novi's agricultural history at that farm.
That's right. And so the Tollgate Farm is now an MSU farm on Meadowbrook Road, just north of 12 Mile. But we chose that, the Historical Commission chose that to really kind of signify all of the farms that were part of Novi's sort of history until fairly recently. We had, it was an agriculture community. And so that property continues to be 160 acres of open space, and it gives kind of a backdrop to the sign of what a farm looked like and does look like, and that the chief component is open space that you can use for livestock or crops or whatever. But it's a nice piece of property to use to talk about in a marker like that, because it's been a farm in Novi since 1836. And really,
1836.
1836.
Wow.
So it's really only had 3.
When the Bassetts came from
The Bassetts
New York?
were from New York, as did almost all of our early settlers. I think the first 80 families, almost all of them are from a fairly small area in the state of New York. So the Bassett family owned it for a period of time up until 1951, and then they sold it to another family, the Meyer family. And then the Meyer family set up a foundation that donated the property to MSU in 1987. They donated 60 acres of the property, and the other 100 acres is still owned by the Americana Foundation.
I think that those families would really be proud of the fact that it is still a working farm that is providing education and information to generations. That farm has really touched thousands and thousands of people and provided information about what the early life was like. So I know it's, agriculture has changed over the years, and the way we farm is very different. But at least the buildings are there, the barns are there. Some young people have never been in a barn before, or have seen a tractor, or even fished in a pond, and there's a big pond there, and I know that you have it open.
We do, yep.
And you also, there, as a part of the whole Michigan State University program, have you have a Master Gardener program, as well as other kinds of learning.
Volunteer opportunities, sure.
Yeah,
and
volunteer
educational
opportunities.
Yep.
4-H club.
There's a very active 4-H
there.
club, that does both animals and works with vegetables, that sort of thing. And really, a big thrust of the property now is just agriculture, education, but really aimed at mostly kids, youths, and really kind of aimed at, hey, where does your food come from? So it's not so much,
Not from Kroger's.
Not from Kroger's,
even though we love to go to Kroger's.
Well, sure,
just,
right, and then it makes it convenient. Most people don't want to raise their own, livestock or whatever.
Sure.
But still, if you're going to make decisions about, how you treat farms and agriculture, and whether or not you want something that's as, clear and pure as possible, or maybe herbicides are okay, or all those kinds of decisions regarding agriculture, you kind of have to know at base where your food comes from and what affects how it arrives at your
One of the
dinner plate.
things, I know that you also provide a service to people that are maybe have some kind of a tree or some kind of a garden, and they have questions about something that's going on, in a negative way, something that's affecting their garden or their flowers or whatever, and Michigan State either provides staff there, or you're the person that actually tells them, gives them suggestions on how to cure whatever that problem is.
Yeah, so the property, you're right, is a Michigan State University property, but even farther than that, it's an MSU extension property, and each county has extension staff in it that solve the kind of problems you have. If somebody came to Tollgate,
and classes and programs,
and classes and that sort of thing, we do classes at Tollgate also. But if somebody showed up, I would be the person they talk to, and if I can't help them, I know who can, and so I can, kind of.
And I know you have other resources that you have worked with for centuries, not centuries, decades maybe, but beekeepers. There's been beekeepers that come there and provide, and you do maple syrup.
We do maple syrup in the spring, sure. So that would be a late February, March, April thing, and we do that every year. I have a number of volunteers that are involved in that, always looking for more people.
And you do it the same way they've done for centuries, right?
Well, centuries. We do use electric pumps to move sap around and whatnot. All my volunteers
Would you
are
boil it
60
down
Yeah,
outside?
yeah. So at base, it's a very simple process. You just put the sap in, which is 2%, into a pan, and you boil it until you boil off the water and concentrate the sugar until you get to about 68%. So you're kind of doing a 40-to-1 reduction of sap to maple syrup.
I don't want to neglect, because I know we're running out of time, but I don't want to neglect one of the markers also, which is the one that's the high performance legend, the Novi Special. Which
Outside
was
the library.
Yeah, and it's right at the Novi Library.
Yep.
Plus, it's sort of linked to the water tower, the old water tower on Novi Road.
Absolutely.
That is just south of Grand River.
Right.
And people see that water tower, which was the birthplace of the Novi Special engine. Mr. Welch had his business there, the Novi Equipment,
yep.
and they built those engines there. And everyone in Indianapolis, at the Indy 500 anyway, remembers this Novi engine or knows about its history. They have a museum there as well. Everybody knows about it, and we have the real car.
The last remaining car.
The last remaining car that the Novi Special engine was in, correct?
That's right. So, so Lou Welch, who was, as you say, the owner of the Novi Equipment Company, which was a supplier of mostly auto air conditioning units, but that was kind of his day job. Yeah, he was very interested in the Indianapolis 500. He really wanted to win that. He developed with others, an engine that had a supercharger on it that really beefed up the horsepower of the engine. He thought, wow, that's the ticket. So he raced cars at Indy 500 from the 1940s through the early 1960s, and he never won. But never won.
No, the Novi Special engine, but there was something special about it.
It was. Yeah. It had a very distinctive sound. You'd always know when the Novi Special was out on the track.
Well, I know that same car that's at the library has been in parade, you know, on the anniversary, a certain anniversary of the Indy 500. It was on a float, and then now it's at the library. And that car, I actually even heard it start up. I know that it still runs. It actually still runs, but it came to Novi through a foundation that we had to pay for, and it, you know, we had to pay for the parts, but it came in crates, and somebody very
put it all back together.
Put it all back together with love, you know, and put it all together and made the car again so that we would have it as a memento, I guess, of a different age.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So is there anything else in closing that you would like to tell us about the markers besides we really want people to go see them?
We want to go see them, and so you can get this wonderful brochure was put together by the City of Novi, and it's available over at the City Hall, I'm sure. And
at the Novi Library.
And at the Novi Library, yep. And one of the pieces to this brochure, there's a map on the inside that shows you where all the Novi markers are located. And so I certainly think it's worthwhile to tour around and see the markers that we have, that we do have a lot of history in our community. And I think, you know, it gives people perspective to appreciate it.
I know. Well, thank you so much for really helping to inform people about the markers and tell them a little bit about Novi's history and what's on those markers. And I really hope that our viewing audience will be able to get out there and at least see a couple of them in the not too distant future. So thanks for being a guest, and I know you were I just want to thank you so much for being really the originator of this particular project, and because it means a lot to us. We don't really have a lot of visible history, you know, and this is something that is really great for our community. So thanks for all you did as
thanks,
a part
Kathy.
of it.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And also, Roy also is the person that puts in the all of the displays in the Novi cabinet on the first floor of the Novi Library. And he's had some really interesting displays there. So I hope you check out the display cabinet on the first floor, just around the lobby entrance. And we've got farms in there now, I think, and I'm not sure what's coming next, but make sure you check it all out because it's very interesting. So thanks for joining us today, and stay tuned for our next show. Thanks.